Good morning to everyone. My name is Helena Redondo. I'm the Talent Program Manager at BIST, the Barcelona Institute of Science and Technology, and I will guide you through this session. And also, I will have an eye on the chat. So during the talks from our speakers, if you have anything to say, please feel free to write it there. We will take all the questions at the end. And now, hello and welcome everybody to this satellite session of the 2021 BIST Conference. This year, the conference is focused on quantum technologies, but this session is not about quantum, it's about the importance of well-being and mental health on research. This session is also a statement. A career in science should be enjoyable. We all agree in something, and is that science is beautiful, is loaded with challenges, discoveries, that feeling of being the first, of knowing the unknown, and the good feeling of understanding something that was a mystery just some time ago. And what about the images? Have you felt the emotion of being the first to see the structure of, I don't know, a protein or cell structure, a galaxy? Science is a great source of lovely images. And what about the rush of adrenaline? When your experiment works, or when stats confirm that your hypothesis was right, and you have a tiny, tiny p-value looking at you, being a researcher is great. You feel quite clever, you are surrounded by great minds, you travel to conferences, you have great conversations, you work pretty much at your own pace sometimes. So it sounds great, doesn't it? But we also can agree in something else, and is that research is brutal. It's a permanent challenge. It's sometimes seen as a fight against the element. And this is sometimes something that becomes a price too high to pay for some researchers. It is very common in research environments to have conversations about impostor syndrome. You know, when suddenly you realize that I'm not clever enough to be here. What am I doing here? How long till they discover that I'm a fraud? We also talk a lot about people feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious. We have situations of depression, low self-esteem, burnout. We are very familiar with all these topics, unfortunately. What about the holidays? Family time, long working hours? Researchers always complain about how difficult it is to find a balance between the work and the personal life, but we are clever people and we manage to come up with a great excuse. It is just because we need to publish, right? It's about publish or perish. So we have all heard about that. And we do it because we need to do it. It's what has to be done to be competitive and to not be left behind. Some days ago, I was in a meeting about an European initiative related to mental health and researchers. And Janet Metcalfe from Vitae said something that works beautifully. It's just the perfect summary of being a researcher. What she said was, being a researcher, it is an ideal job, except for the work environment and the culture. And this is very sad. I think this is very unfair, but it's probably true. So we agree with this first part. Being a researcher is a great job, and we strongly believe that it must be a better way to do research and to enjoy research. At BIST, as well as in our 7 research centers, researchers' mental health has been a priority for quite a long time. It is in our strategic plan, and we're developing our own programs to deal with these issues. And some of the centers already have some programs that address it as well. We have a bunch of counselors, therapists, psychologists, people who knows the system and knows how to try to help these researchers and overcoming all these issues. As you may imagine, the actual situation, the pandemic, make things already worse. And this situation, this fragile mental health of our work ecosystem has become more and more evident. In other words, more and more researchers had to face that they were not okay, and some of them start asking for help, and some others sadly decide that was the last trip, I'm just abandoning science. So I want to insist in this. For us, for BIST and for our centers, researchers' mental health is a priority. So today we're here to have an overview of what is happening to our researchers, what's happening in our labs and also in labs from abroad. And we will talk about problems, but we will also talk about solutions, hopefully. Because we love science and we love research, but we're also convinced that it has to be a better way to do research. Our researchers need to be happy, they need to feel safe, and they need to be confident and use their passion not to survive in this scientific jungle, but to thrive and to achieve as much as they want to. For this reason, we have today 3 extraordinary women to talk about well-being and mental health in different spheres. Before starting introducing them, I want to make just a couple of quick announcements. The first one is about the agenda. Unfortunately, Victoria Conesa won't be able to be with us. She's very sorry. She says hi to everybody. And the second one is remember to write any question on the chat, and we will go through them at the end of the talks. Having said this, I will start introducing the first of our 3 speakers. She is Dr. Kate Jones. She's the head of learning and professional development at Vitae, and she has a special interest in educational transitions and theories of motivation. And today she will give us some context on what is going on in the world of researchers. Kate, thanks a lot for being here today with us, and feel free to start whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you so much, Elena, for that wonderful introduction. I'm not sure about the extraordinary, but certainly it's great to hear the words of my colleague, Janet Metcalf, who's the principal of Vitae there. And today I am going to talk to you on behalf of Vitae, which is a non-profit programme dedicated to the professional development of researchers globally. And it's great to be able to talk to you about this issue of what institutions are doing in response to the issue of poor well-being and mental health in the researcher population. So this is just a little collection of articles about researcher well-being and mental health. And, you know, as we all know, this has been a issue that has hit the headlines more than one time and has been a growing focus. And one potential source of that is the publication in 2017 of a landmark paper by Dr. Katia Levesque and colleagues at Ghent University. So this paper, which is nicknamed the Flanders Study, examined the prevalence of mental health problems in a representative sample of PhD researchers in Flanders in Belgium. 3,659 PhD candidates responded to the survey, and this survey used established mental health and wellbeing scales. And the project found that 32% of PhD researchers, or that's 1 in 3, were at risk of having or developing a common psychiatric disorder. And this was shown to be 2.43 times more likely as compared to the highly educated in the general population. Oh, and just to say that I will put my references in the chat towards the end of the presentation so that you can read the whole paper at your leisure. So since that paper, further studies have explored the extent of the issue and the range of factors that correlate with better or worse mental health and well-being. And I'm going to share a few of those findings and then talk a little bit about some of the actions that institutions are taking. So, following on from the Flanders study, myself, Janet Metcalf actually, and at Vitae, and colleagues at Ghent University conducted a follow-up explorative study, and this was with UK institutions. And this research revealed that the doctoral degree is often described as a stressful undertaking, and supervisory relationships are a common source of issues. It also found that researchers who had moved countries to undertake their PhD were identified as particularly vulnerable to wellbeing and mental health issues. And this is possibly due to not having a local support network, among other reasons. Where PhD candidates responded that they'd considered leaving or suspending their studies, this was taken as an indication of potential wellbeing issues. Now, it's interesting that candidates who had a career development plan and had participated in some training activities or initiatives were less likely to express an intention to stop their PhD, to leave research. Some good news is that overall researchers were positive about their contact with their supervisor. And, there's a real strong connection between those good relationships with supervisors and managers and then better subjective well-being. So the study also illustrated some of the aspects that make improving researcher well-being and mental health a particular challenge for institutions. So going back to Elena's comment about research culture, this is something that is not easy for any institution to solve, and so it's trying to kind of think about some of the challenges for institutions and some of the solutions to those challenges. So, for example, rates of formal disclosure of well-being and mental health issues to institutions are quite low in comparison to the indication of the true scale of the issue. And we all know that it can be quite difficult sometimes, to talk to people about well-being and mental health, and perhaps even more so to talk to an institution and to a workplace colleague about that. So there are some barriers for institutions to identifying issues at an early stage before they reach crisis level. Researchers and their supervisors and managers don't always know what's available. And there's a kind of bit of a tricky issue, especially for doctoral researchers, where although they're registered as students, actually they're kind of in that difficult place between students and staff. They can find it difficult to get the right support. So the information that's targeted at undergraduates who are doing their first degree maybe isn't quite right for doctoral researchers, but then they may not be eligible to access support services that are for staff or employees. So that, as I said, they're kind of stuck between those two positions. And of course, as with many things, we know that something that's a difficult challenge has been made more pressing and perhaps more challenging due to the impact of COVID-19 and the associated lockdowns and restrictions that have really affected the way researchers can and do work and connect with their peers and colleagues. So Vitae was involved in a survey during April to May 2020, and this was during the first COVID-related lockdown in the UK. And in this survey, doctoral researchers and research staff reported being very stressed about their work and worried about their future plans. So 4 out of 5 showed some level of mental distress. 3 in 4 showed us having low levels of mental well-being. And what we're understanding now is that the effects of this period of stress are likely to be seen for some time. So some anecdotal reports from colleagues across institutions suggest that the true impact of COVID on researchers and on their careers may be only just appearing. And institutions and funders are really grappling with how can they adapt the assessment of researchers to account for a quite extended period of disruption, and particularly to those researchers who are doing research that cannot be done from home. They've lost a lot of time. And what about those researchers who've missed out on those key career opportunities like networking, international conferences, for example? So this is something that, the sector is, as a whole, and institutions individually are trying to kind of think about and tackle. Okay, so I feel like it's been a lot of doom and gloom, and I do want to give you some kind of good news in the sense that of what's actually happening in response to this, some action that's being taken by institutions. So the good news is that institutions and funders do recognise the challenge, and they are prioritising action to improve researcher wellbeing and mental health. And this is often linked to a broader ambition to improve the research culture and the research environment. Just thinking back to the quotation that Elena gave, researcher is a perfect job if it wasn't for the research culture and environment. And I think that funders and institutions do see that change is needed there. And we're seeing that, I think, through more and more focus on issues around equality, diversity and inclusion, understanding that we need to make universities and the research culture inclusive. In a survey of Vitae member institutions, so we have just over, in the UK, 140 member institutions, and worldwide, I think just around 165. Respondents noted that the wellbeing and mental health of researchers is one of their top personal priorities, as well as being a top priority for their institution. And this is really enforced across the research and higher education sectors and at a policy level in the UK, and I know in the EU also. So this is an example from the UK. There was a major funding body investment by Research England and the Office for Students in 17 university-led projects. And these projects were to create and evaluate approaches to support researcher wellbeing. Now, these initiatives were, many of them, collaborative, and some of them we at Vitae partnered on. And they've produced an array of resources. So things like, for example, toolkits, videos, and all of these are available open access. And so again, at the end of the presentation, I'll post into the chat all of the links so that you can go and have a look at those. And I hope people find them useful. One of the things that we've got is a wellbeing and mental health lens on the Vitae Researcher Development Framework, which you may be familiar with. And we've also got decision trees, and that's, for example, to help people understand how do you intervene, if you think there's an issue, how do you intervene before things escalate? So there's some really useful things there, both for researchers and those who support them. And the other thing that might be helpful, and I'd love to get your input on this in the chat, is that the Vitae Smarten survey that I mentioned earlier asked respondents for suggestions of how their supervisors or their line managers and their institutions could help them to work effectively during the lockdown. And it struck us that many of these pieces of advice could apply to supporting researchers suffering from poor wellbeing or mental health for any reason. So I'd really love to have your input on this list in the Q&A, and perhaps we can discuss it. If you put it in the chat, we can discuss it later in the Q&A. So what, if anything, would you personally add to or remove from this list? It'd be really good to get your thoughts. So thank you so much for your attention. As I said, I'm going to post the links to the references, and there's just a little bit of information here about what Vitae does. I mentioned the Researcher Development Framework, and you can see what we know as the wheel there. And if you'd like further information, please do go to www.vitae.ac.uk, and you can contact me by email or on Twitter if you want to follow up or ask any questions. So it's been a pleasure to be involved in this, and I look forward to hearing questions from you all later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Remember to type your questions on the chat. And now let's continue with Dr. Helena Martinez. She's a group leader in IBEC, the Institute of Engineering of Catalonia, and also the Talent and Training Deputy Director at IBEC. She will give us an insight about what is happening in the centers and also about the position of supervisors. Elena, the floor is yours. I think you're muted.
I think I'm muted. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Elena, for your nice introduction and also for inviting me to this nice satellite session on well-being and mental health. And as you said, I'm gonna talk about IBEC institutional approach. So how we've been working quite hard in the times of COVID, but we've started working and taking care of this of well-being and the mental health of IBEC people quite a few years ago already. And this is what I'm going to try to explain. So what are we doing at IBEC for our researchers? And let's see if we can have also some nice ideas for the future improvement. So the first thing we did to try to approach what could we do in terms of mental health for our people was to start having conversations and also some tests to the IBEC community. To know their opinion, and this is basically the answers that we got. The first thing that it was quite common for all the different research profiles, I would say, that we have in the institution, is that 60% of people, they thought that they worked quite a lot. So they recognized that the workload was for more than 10 hours at the day, frequently, and only a few people, like 12%, they report that they never do it. So this is quite hard work that was recognized by the community. As a consequence, or one of the main consequences of this hard workload, is that the work life is out of balance. So quite a high percentage of IBEC community, around 39%, in the survey, they indicated that they go home frequently very tired. And of course, this represents a challenge when you have to take care of your household. And but only 4% reported that they come work too tired because of the household work. And the other problem that was already mentioned is that the research culture, and this was something that it was also acknowledged by IBEC community. So research culture is very competitive. And already around 35% of the IBEC community members, they were already saying that, well, if you don't stand up for yourself, people will step on you. So really reflecting which is the view of the community regarding competition in research. So we also inquired in the survey. So if they were kind of satisfied with the measures that were already in place, mainly to make life and work balance available. And well, this was the result of the survey. So 1 means disagree with the satisfaction in the measurements, and 4 means completely agree. And what we found is that actually a majority of the IBEC community was kind of already satisfied, I would say, with the measurements of IBEC to combine their life and their career. And there was a bunch of measurements already taking place for that. So it's like a culture of possibilities of doing part-time job, teleworking, sabbatical leaves, nurseries, etc. I will talk more about later on. But we also saw that while being the majority of people between the 2 and the 3, we still had plenty of room for improvement. Then we had a few focus groups and conversations, and for that we have a few tools and committees within IBEC. So one of the committees is the Gender and Diversity Committee. So they are doing an excellent job proposing actions to improve mental being, but not only this at IBEC. But then we also have some ideas or some actions that are already discussed in our human resources strategy for research, and those are implemented in the training. There is also conversations on focus group about the future of telework. And in all these forums, the researchers of IBEC, at all the stages of their career, they were already telling us that there is this need of providing tools that really can help them to cope with the stress management, with the well-being and resilience. And of course, the COVID pandemic has been especially challenging. Mainly, to have a lot of researchers from abroad, or even people that are here, but they don't have their families together with them. So it has been a struggling from people without family support, team leaders, and the community as a whole. So our approach was that we cannot solve this issue with just a pool of isolated actions, but we need a continuous and holistic approach to solve it, or to try to at least minimize the effects. So this was the approach that we took at IBEC towards well-being and mental health, and it is based on two main pillars. We have, on the one hand, strategic actions, specific actions that were implemented at IBEC. And these actions have been implemented within the framework of the IBEC Human Resources Strategy for Research certification, and also on our gender and diversity plan. And on the other hand, we have a set of collaborative actions that they have been established within the framework of our partnerships, such as, for instance, the BIST and also communities of practice. So here you can see a collection of some of the actions that we have been included. And as I said, we have actions that are derived from our human resources certification. And in there, we've put in place this IBEC Vital plan. And this includes actions such as, for instance, the contact and special rates for kindergarten near IBEC. Also, psychotherapy sessions at a reduced price for IBEC members. We also have yoga and Pilates session, even online Pilates session. And we also have a room for breastfeeding. And additionally, within the pandemic, we have offered group coaching sessions to try to help people to live with uncertainty and in a constructive mindset. And also for supervisors, we have implemented some coaching one-to-one. Regarding the collaborative actions, in the framework of our partnerships, we've implemented, for instance, together with BIST centers, a training for resilience, and then on for the life science of community of practice, a series on researchers' well-being, and also a coaching and mutual support for the human resources heads and academic officers. That it was also this implemented with the BIST Institute. And now, just before giving my word to the other participants in the group, I want to just briefly comment my point as a group leader, that I think it's also kind of important, because there is quite a lot if you look at mainly for PhDs and students. I think information mainly about group leaders it's maybe not that much, But I would say that, of course, as a PhD student, you work really hard because you want to get your PhD, and then you want to continue your academic career. And when you are postdoc, you are starting to be even more stressful because you have to achieve like a professorship or a permanent position. But then what? I mean, if you are becoming a group leader or a professor, you might think that the stress might be, diminished, and you will be maybe not that at that level. But in there, I have to tell you that group leaders, they are really stressed too. And this is just a nice cartoon showing some of the reasons of why group leaders are also stressed. And if you can see, I mean, there are things such as related to the competitive environment of research. You have to keep on knowing what was basically ingested in news every day, because you need to have a good overview of the state of the art in your field. And so this is one of the pressure. You have to cope with managing rejection. And this, you can think that as a PhD student, you will also have to cope with managing rejection. But you can think that the amount of rejections that you have, they are kind of cumulative along your life. And you can think that you might get used to it, but I can tell you they are still hard. And it's very hard to get used to rejection. Mainly if you know that the success of your group, it will depend on this rejection. Then you have a lot of pressure to really keep on with maybe your academic duties or other duties, and requests from senior managers, requests from university estimates, and those things, so there's a lot of meetings, committees, that they increase your workload and strain in a daily basis. Then we have the reviews, of course, as a group leaders. So there are a lot of periods in which we are evaluated. And this is, it really leaves with us with a lot of, little space to really breathe and live. And then there is this competitive landscape, that we should be in a collaborative environment, but then this is sometimes not like this. And sometimes, depending on where you work in, it might be also hard to find allies with your peers and get a more collaborative environment instead of a competitive landscape. Then we also have, like, of course, working for long hours, and the part of the job, of our job, implies that we should support and mentor PhDs and undergrad students, postdocs, and help them to solve their problems. And sometimes that's difficult, because if you are also struggling, it's sometimes difficult to separate one thing and then get a positive mind to really have a positive influence and help really the people that it's underneath you the way you wanted to help them. Then we already talked about this impostor syndrome that, as a PhD student you might have, as a postdoc you might have, but believe me, as a group leader, you also might have this impostor syndrome. And I particularly like the plate juggling situation, in which basically you have to balance research, teaching, student mentoring, getting outreach, getting papers out, administrative workload. And this gives you the idea that you are always trying to solve the urgent stuff and not really taking care of the things that are important stuff. This has an impact, of course, in the work and life balance, and also sometimes it also creates. It's difficult to communicate that you are having these pressures and that you cannot cope because it might be perceived as a weakness. So, sometimes it's difficult to disclose these mental health conditions or problems. So, I will come to these final remarks, saying that, well-being is a top-down and bottom-up process, and then taking care and coaching must be something that should be done at all the stages of the career, because for group leaders, this is also essential. The other thing that I want to remark is that a lot of stress sometimes comes from interpersonal conflicts, and you need to seek help in these situations and check the useful tools that might lead to a conflict resolution. It might be a protocol, anti-harassment, or research integrity commissions that might help you within the institutions to solve the problems. And then the other thing that it's very helpful, and I can say I'm a part of this a peer mentoring group of group leaders, and it's very helpful, is to talk to your colleagues and peers. So you have PhD committees, postdoc committees, group leader committees maybe, and they are there when you need help. So participate in these mentoring programs might be really useful. And that's what I wanted to tell you today. Thank you very much for being there.
Thanks, Elena. And thanks for that honesty, speaking about all these things that are happening at the same time when you're a supervisor. I think most of the time we just assume they know how to deal with this, and they're struggling as well. So thanks for that honesty. And now, last but not least, let me introduce Hanna Kranas. She's a last year PhD student at IRB, at the Institute of Biomedical Research in Barcelona. And she's here as a predoctoral researcher, but also as a representative of the psychosocial risk evaluation team and the student council. So please, Hanna, let us know how are these researchers, how are they living these situations, and if there's anything that we can do to help them. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thanks for the great introduction, Elena. So, some of you might be wondering, why is a PhD student here? And I'm here to tell you that my voice matters. PhD voices matter, and everyone's voices matter when it comes to mental health of all of us in academia. So I would like to revisit, Kate mentioned already a bit, but I would like to revisit shortly why the PhD voices matter and why the problem is especially big in this group. So there are studies that show that graduate students are more than 6 times as likely to experience depression and anxiety as compared to the general population. As Kate has mentioned, the prevalence of mental health problems is higher in PhD students than in any highly educated group. And then that means in turn that 1 in 2 PhD students experience psychological distress, and 1 in 3 is at risk of a common psychiatric disorder. For me, this paints quite a dire picture, but maybe you are wondering, okay, those studies maybe have been done on specific groups of students. What about Spain? We're in such a sunny and happy country. And sorry to tell you the news, but in this survey done just last year on a group of PhD students in Spain, they have found that citing the mental state of PhD students in Spain is alarming. The burnout rates are high as well in this group, especially when it comes to emotional exhaustion. And as for the most relevant predictors of the mental health issues in the PhD students, it's the psychological variables and the satisfaction with the dissertation advisor. So now let's go a bit more in depth into exactly these causes of why the PhDs are at such a high risk within our community. So it's this toxic mix of the psychological variables and the academic work context. And when it comes to psychological variables, it might be true that academia might tend to attract people with specific traits, like some of us tend to be more perfectionistic, self-demanding. We might have limiting beliefs, like believing that we are not gonna make it, we are not worth it. A lot of us might be prone to feeling guilt, shame, find it hard to deal with uncertainty, and a lot of us experience imposter syndrome. But a lot of those things, while they might be a component, they are also a result. And most importantly, those psychological variables are just a cherry on top of the cake. And the cake is the academic work context. So it's the work and organizational context that matter here a lot, and we have them all in common. So some of those things have been mentioned already by both Kate and Elena, but I would like to show you that there is a staggering amount of sources that enumerate all the different demands that we have, both as all academics that we share, like the open-ended nature of research, which means the long-term objectives, which might make it hard to motivate ourselves with those infrequent rewards, like competitiveness and the work-life balance that tends to be more tilted toward work for all of us. But then there are also issues that are very specific to the PhD students, and we shouldn't ever forget that. So for example, the looming PhD deadline, this ticking clock that we have 3 or 4 years to finish the PhD, and we have to be on time and we have to be successful within this framework, right? While the experiments take their time, the science doesn't bind to our will, and we cannot rush it. So this is one big component. The lack of often institutional support, or the local support in case of the students moving to a new country, having to learn in a new language, experiencing a totally different totally different culture, right? This can be very stressful as well. The publish or perish relates to PhD students as well, because often it's publish or have a good PhD thesis. So there is this belief to have a good PhD thesis, you have to publish great papers, which might not necessarily be true. And then financial concerns. So for example, not many people realize that for a PhD student, having to wait for a reimbursement of a conference fee or having to wait a few days for a delayed salary is a huge problem, because often we don't have enough savings to get us by to the next month. The career uncertainty and often lack of proper career guidance in the universities. And of course, the fact that whenever we start the PhDs, this is often the first time that we start failing, and failing so frequently. This is a huge challenge. And then coming to the biggest thing of all, the mentorship and the supervision. The type of the supervision always depends both on the student and the PI, and it should always be a conversation between the two, what they need and how to do it so it works best for the two. But often that does not happen, and then it means that the supervision can often make or break how the student will feel. So why is all of this so important? Well, because of this binding agent and multiplying component, which is, citing Dr. Zoe Ayres, this frequent in academia culture of acceptance that mental health issues are a part of the journey, and especially the PhD journey. So we are expected to suffer, but it does not and should not be like that. Because if we accept all of those demands, they start to pile up, and then trying to cope with them can in turn result in experiencing insomnia, anxiety, depression, procrastination, and all of that. And here I want to stop and say that it's nothing wrong to experience any of those things. This is often not your fault. It's just the reaction of your organism to such staggering amount of demands that are being put on you, and your body not knowing how to cope with this situation properly. And why this should be of interest to the institutions as well. So a very important point is that there is a relationship of the performance with arousal. So the more arousal we have, up until some point, the performance is going to increase. But there comes a moment where the arousal becomes anxiety, and then the performance becomes strongly impaired. So it not only helps the people, but it also helps the work that the people can do. If we let them relax, support them, think of all the different issues that they might be experiencing, and that puts more things on their plates. So to not leave you with such a dire picture, I would like to very shortly talk about the solutions on a personal level. I am not an expert on this, so I can only mention some things that I know have worked for people and that other mental health experts shared with me as an examples. One is therapy, which is basically training your brain in better coping strategies. Support groups seem to work well. The peer support, so just meeting with your fellow PhDs and sharing, which also Elena has mentioned, can work for PIs. Reaching out for mentoring opportunities and talking, for example, in postdocs from your institution. And if you can, relying on your supervisor. And the last thing, reaching out to the institute. And why is that last point important? Because we have a need for tailored solutions. So as I mentioned, the issues that PhDs, but also any other group for that matter, face are different than those of other workers groups. So then who knows best what they need? Well, the group itself. So who knows best what PhDs, for example, at IRB need? Well, it's the IRB PhDs. And knowing that, I want to also tell you that your institutes want to help. Sometimes they are not sure what is the best course of action, but the good thing is that they want to help. They know what is the funding available. They know what might be the administrative hurdles on the way. And then on the other side, there is us, the PhDs. We want help, but often we don't know how to ask for help, or we are scared of asking for it. But on the other hand, for you institutions, it's good to know that we know our needs and we can be very creative in proposing solutions and helping you go through the administrative hurdles that you see. So let's shake hands and start working together. So here I wanted to say a story, but I already see that I'm running a bit out of time. So I just will take you very shortly to this. We organized an event that we didn't know we could organize, a mental health event with a group of great mental health experts focused specifically on PhDs, but we kind of ended up organizing it by accident. But without going too much into the details, I want to tell you the most important parts that we came out of this. So no one organized this kind of an event before. And this event ended up being a huge success because first, we PhDs did not know that there could be funding for this. We have never asked, we didn't know that we can ask. And the institute didn't know that this kind of event was needed. And when we ended up organizing this event out of nowhere, we figured out that, well, we have the support of the institute, they are on our side, they have funding, they will promote us, they're completely on board. And then in turn, for the Institute, our involvement helped consider very important factors for organizing this type of events for PhDs, which is anonymity, creating a safe environment to share confidentiality. And it also gave us really good control of the topics that we wanted covered and people that we wanted to hear. So what can institutes do better? Ask and be prepared to listen. This is the biggest thing that I can give you. And then second, once you listen, try tailored solutions to each group. For example, if the students complain that they don't earn enough money and the therapy is very expensive, as Elena mentioned, and as also we are doing here at IRB, try to provide discount agreements with local therapists. For lack of awareness, you can provide mental well-being training, both for mentors and mentees, try events tailored to needs of each group, facilitate interaction and mentoring, because if people talk about this, they say it already helps a lot. And most importantly, commit to this openly and proudly. It's great that we talk about these issues being there and wanting to solve them, because then people know that the Institute wants to do something about it. And finally, for lack of ideas, you can try an open forum or institute-wide anonymous surveys focused specifically on this topic. How can we help the PhDs, postdocs, PIs, etc.? Well, find someone that does not mind asking for help. It can be the student or a postdoc council. It can be friendly faces at the academic office, your PhD committee, your PI, and then put forward this idea of surveying and presenting the results to the administration. Best if you have some ideas and solutions ready, even better if you ask for them in a survey, and then help the institute problem solve and get over the administrative obstacles. And here I would like to finish saying that all voices and the needs matter here, and that it's normal to struggle in this demanding world of academia, but it doesn't mean that it is okay that it's this way. So if you do not feel comfortable using your voice, it's okay, you don't have to. Someone at your institution will be, just find them. And remember, our voices can help our institutes help us better. And it's all of them, PhDs, postdocs, technicians, PIs, managers. And here I would like to finish and thank you all for listening. And feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and email that are here on the screen. And I will be more than happy to share my slides, experience, and references. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hanna. I suddenly felt myself like a PhD again and say, oh, why you were not there saying all this, that it's not normal that we feel like that. I would like to say thanks to all our speakers, and now feel more than free at your questions in the chat. I've seen the first question, so I'm going to take that one. It says, thanks for showing IBEC's nice program on this. Unfortunately, this is not the case for every institute within BIST. What's BIST's strategy to offer comparable services among all BIST institute and members? I'm going to take that. First of all, I think not everybody needs the same, and I've seen like different levels of action here. We receive emails from PhD students or postdocs saying, hey, I just did a course that, surprisingly included a little bit of well-being on techniques of how to cope with stress. That was there for a reason. It's just a good way to teach you something, and at the same time it's useful for us to sense if something is not going as well as it should. So we receive emails like that, hey, I just realized I'm not coping properly. What can I do? Some of these conversations end in that email in where we say, okay, feel free to come for a chat and we can guide you. We can try to direct you to your center because your center already has a program working on that. And sometimes just feeling heard and feeling understood that, okay, I'm not the only one. That makes a huge impact on people because they feel that they are not alone and their resources are there. So that would be like the first line of defense we have. We also have, and some of the information I'm going to give, it's not secret, but you might be one of the first ones to know. We're working on a psychological program, a full program, just to address better all these things. We're trying to recruit therapists that know the system. So you don't spend the first 2 sessions saying, this is a pre-doc. My boss is not the one who pays me because I'm paid by a grant. But despite that, he has power on me and I'm stressed, but my colleague is from a different country and we cannot. So all these things, they do not, hopefully you don't have to go through this. So it's more directed therapy if you need it. We are also working on webinars, workshops, and people say, oh, no, we want more science, less coaching. No, we need coaching for this. We need how to learn strategies for that. So we have this psychological program that is just growing, and hopefully soon we will be able to show it to everybody. We also have another program that is just recruiting people now. It's a mentoring program. In labs, it happens that spontaneous mentoring, when you're stressed and you're a PhD student, there's always a nice postdoc that comes and says, don't worry, it's going to be fine. You need to suffer a little bit and then you'll get your rewards after. Don't worry, it's fine. And that suits you a little bit. With pandemic, we have lost a little bit this interaction. So we are designing a full mentoring program, and we are trying to target different people with that. Not only the PhD student that doesn't know what want to do with their life and it feels very stressed, but also for postdocs that want to take new paths, and you need this coaching, this support network. So we are also working in that. We know that some centers already offer programs, and they also have their system working. So if that exists, we direct the people who's contacting us to that service already working. If not, we try to find a solution that works for that person. So we are really attentive to that. But we need you to let us know that something isn't going on properly. So that's what we are doing. And if you have anything to that, I'm going to go for another question. So Sarah is asking, to reach a senior position does not mean a more relaxed research life. In fact, in my case, I'm having problems to enjoy my work after getting a senior position. How to recover my passion, my joy? Any one of you want to take that?
I mean, I don't know. I can maybe have some advice. So what I enjoy most, this is what I can say to say my experience about being a researcher, and I think this increases more with the years of my career. It's not only about this paper or this project or blah blah blah, but about seeing the impact of those little things on the people that I are my PhD students, that are my postdocs, and that they see those things as something very important in their careers. So this approach about sharing, not only crying all together because we got the paper rejected or the project rejected, but also sharing the good things that this experiment, they went as we as it went, we thought, and we should be happy about that. It's something that to me brings me quite a joy.
Following with that, do you think that supervisors are properly supported in that? Because I know it's easy to look up and say, oh, they're not taking care of me, that's why I'm stressed. But they have their own struggles. Do you think they are in a nice position to be that proper positive role, and everything is under control, I can help with that? Do you think they are properly supported? Kate, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that would be great. I think that probably I think that what we've seen is there's a lot of variation between different institutions, but I think that on the whole the blanket answer would probably be no, and that's because I think that for all of us it's very challenging to support others with wellbeing and mental health. I mean, we're not kind of experts. It's very difficult to understand the signs, understand. Thinking of Hanna's curve, is this person kind of experiencing a certain level of stress, and that's actually a productive stress, and have they tipped over the curve? And it can be really hard to recognize that. So I think it's really good that people are starting to realize that there does need to be some more support for supervisors and managers of research. Because they're almost stuck in the middle, aren't they? They're having to support other people with their well-being and mental health, and they're also managing their own well-being and mental health, and that's and families as well. So it's kind of the squeezed middle. They're kind of in a tricky position. But I think that we did a research project, and it was called The Supervisor's Voice, and we interviewed PhD supervisors, and we really found that a lot of supervisors feel so underqualified to be able to offer support that what they end up doing is kind of like not really reaching out at all, because they're worried about, what if I say the wrong thing, so I think that there's been a lot of talk recently about the supervision model, and about the fact that, should it be more of a team science approach? Should we think less about those kind of like one-to-one relationships, and more about kind of having a lot of different people within a team, for example, supporting a doctoral researcher, a PhD researcher, and knowing where to go in the institution? Because if you really are suffering with poor mental health, your supervisor it has a limitation in how much they can help, and really you need to be directed to professional services. But the supervisor needs to know how to do that, so they need training in that as well. So that's a long-winded answer, but I think supervisors do need more support.
Another thing that you mentioned, and I think it was UK, about the low disclosure on this. We have seen that there are mechanisms in place. The institutions are aware that there's something that needs to be done. But despite that, and that question maybe will go for Hanna, do you think that especially the PhD students, or maybe the early postdocs that are probably the ones more tender in that sense, what is stopping them from reaching out if they need help? Do you think there's still maybe this felt like it has to be a secret? We are not aware of all these mechanisms in place. What do you think is stopping them from asking for help?
So I think it's quite complicated, but a few things that from the top of my mind is that there is still some distrust because people are not sure whether the administration, the PIs are on their side. And of course they are, but being a student and knowing that those are the people that have your PhD in their hands can be quite stressful in terms of now going forward and saying like, hey, I'm dealing with depression and it makes it hard for me to work. Hey, I'm so stressed that I'm procrastinating, It's very scary to go overall to your boss and then and say that. And then for the administration, it's the same. So I think it's that people are not sure whether it's going to be accepted, whether this is going to have some negative repercussions. And that's why I think it's so important that the institutes don't hide their great mental well-being programs, but actually openly and proudly promote them and say like, hey, we are doing this. Hey, it's okay, whatever you're experiencing, and we are here to help, and say it loud and often, so that this trust starts being built up. And then from that point onwards, we can help people understand and navigate, for example, the code of conduct of the institutes better, so that they understand that there are those systems in place that can help them, that they can report to, and how to do it in maybe some easier language, for example. So that's from the top of my head.
Okay, I'm gonna drop you some extra questions. Just feel free to take them if you want. So what do you think that makes this research environment more susceptible to this problem? Because Hanna mentioned that maybe science is attracting these perfectionist people, that we tend to be overstressed. But do you think that we are doing something particularly wrong to attract these people and keep them like that and stressed and overwhelmed? Do you think it's something that just comes with the job and we just need how to deal with that? Or what are your thoughts on this?
I'm happy to start us off with that one. I mean, I think that there is some truth in the suggestion that researchers tend to be very analytical and critical people, and that if you are quite kind of analytical, those tendencies, which can be a good thing when it comes to the science, can be very challenging when they're turned towards yourself. That kind of self-criticism, self-analysis. You're in a very competitive environment, but of course there's competitive environments in other sectors as well. For example, being a doctor or being, a lawyer. There's other kind of professions where, you're getting kind of, high levels of stress, a very kind of long hours, high pressure job. There is something in the research environment where it tends to be quite hierarchical and quite fragmented. So sometimes it's quite difficult to, in a way that you would, for example, in other sectors, know exactly where to go for help. And Ania already talked about some of those kind of supervision or line management structures that you have that can tend to kind of, you're reporting to one person, but that person has influence, but that person controls the funding. So it can be quite tricky. And I think that there's also this sense of, which I do think, again, you get in other sectors, but a rite of passage that somehow, high levels of stress and kind of, anxiety kind of a part of the territory, and it's almost something that you've got to suffer through to prove yourself. And I think that that's a very problematic view, because what you're doing there is you're kind of normalizing something. So I mean, that's not really a kind of solution, but I think it's a kind of it's an answer. And I think that it's there's a lot of complexity to it.
It's like a ritual. I remember having been said that, oh, you suffer a lot in your PhD, but it's okay because then the postdoc will be your reward. And you think, okay, I'm not going to suffer anymore. And then you realize there are other challenges, but you assume that it's part of the journey. And now you realize, oh, that's not right at all. Right, I'm gonna just read a comment from the audience that goes from Hanna. Say, we all know that PhD students are some of the most vulnerable in this rat race. Thank you for your brave presentation, and thank you for visualizing such an important topic. All of the answers are very insightful and helpful. Would you give any advice to somebody who is considering starting a PhD after listening to us explaining all this jungle that's out there? Would you give them any kind of advice? Is there hope? I guess, I mean, my impression is there's hope, there's light at the end. Any advice for, let's say, a PhD student?
So I can start, but I think it's good if all of us share their bits and pieces of advice here. But I want to stress that, it might be a dire situation, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, which is that, as you can see, there is more and more efforts now to improve the situation, both from the institutes and the institutes over the institutes like BIST. And things are slowly starting to change. And I know that it might still be a bit of a bitter pill that, okay, you're still entering the place where the situation is not resolved. But I think it brings a bit of a comfort that things are improving, everyone is more aware. Hopefully soon people will receive training on this. And if it's a PhD student that is by any chance listening to this or any other talk, I think it already helps knowing what you might expect and what you might apply to yourself and try to help yourself from your own side, and where you can reach out for help as well. So just know that there is a lot of friendly people that want to help, and don't be afraid to reach out to them.
Elena, you show us like what you're doing at IBEC. Do you think that putting all these policies in place and having all these systems, do you have the feeling that they're actually working? Do you have people reaching out saying, okay, I need to use these?
I mean, I think this is something that the community was asking for, and I can say that mostly all the actions that we've started at IBEC, they were really attracting quite a lot of people engaging in the activities. And I think activities such as mentorship programs, they have been like quite demanded. I would say we started doing that for postdocs that they were part of a specific program. And then we also find out that some other postdocs that were not in that particular program were also, wanted to access that mentorship and mentor scheme. So I think, once it's a matter of culture, right? So once people, they really share their experiences, even in the corridors, so they realize that it's okay to be in those programs. It's okay to share your experiences. It's okay to have somebody to talk to when you need it. And I think that's what it counts, that we are, the institutions, that we show that we are there for that.
Okay,
I just wanted to talk to point out regarding the particularities. It was the previous question, but regarding the particularities of the research career, I think one of the, I would say, characteristics is that it's an individual work, and this is something very hard. I mean, if you are working in a company and you develop, I don't know, a strategy for launching a product, in the end, what is going to be seen from the outside is the strategy for launching the product. But everything you will do in research, it will have your name, and your name will be in a different position. And yeah, I mean, you might be able to contribute to this paper or this other, but what it will count is the corresponding author and the first author. And this, creates a lot of pressure. And of course, there is the role model. So you see who is the people that are really, attracting funding, who is the people that are really, and which the profiles they have, and even in your own lab. So you'll see, that guy has 2 papers more than me. So how can I deal with that? So it's in the end this individual work that gives you the credit. And this is very difficult to cope with. It's not collaborative, actually. You need to collaborate, but in the end, somebody takes credit of the work.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's and we create that great excuse that it's publish or perish. You have to do it, and if you don't do it, it's okay. But you feel the consequences after that. It's like I'm falling behind. I'm going to read a couple of comments. We have a sad one now. I was a PhD student once in USA, Paradise of Excellence. One fellow student committed suicide in his lab, a totally unacceptable price for excellence. I think we all agree with that. It's totally unacceptable. And that maybe reinforces that message that sometimes the pressure is so high, and it can be from outside or from ourselves. Really sad to read that. And the other question is, sometimes I have the feeling that the science researchers are not very fan of psychology. How do you feel about it? I think before you started, I think it's not about psychology. Before reaching the psychology level, there are many other steps that we can take to cope with that. And we have like the network, the support groups, the coaching, the mentorship. And then I think probably the psychology is one. It's not the first door we knock, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think researchers are not fan of it?
So I would actually come here and say that while it doesn't have to be the first step, a lot of people that end up going to therapy say they wish they have went earlier. Because you can think about it like exercise, just the exercise for your brain to, as I said in the presentation, train yourself to cope better with the demanding situations, whether it's in science or your private life. And while it's true that maybe some of us still think that psychology is not properly studied, in recent years, there have been more and more of great studies on, for example, success of different therapy types compared with medical approaches, very well done. And one of this kind of therapy that has been researched quite a lot, to my knowledge, and seems to be quite scientifically based is, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy. So, of course, while we still suffer from having different types of therapy that might be more based in science or less based in science, there are new approaches that are being studied properly right now. So I think this landscape is slowly changing, and a part of changing this mindset of psychology being some woo-woo thing is also talking openly about it and about good experiences that it can bring to people and that it has brought to people in academia as well, and how it can form a part of the solution.
Okay, I cannot see any other question from the chat. So if you're just doubting, just right there. If not, and just to end up like on a nice place, where are we going from here? Are you optimistic about where all this is going? Do you think that all these policies and all these programs are gonna make a change in the culture? Do you know that people is aware of that, or is just a list of good intentions? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I'm happy to start us off. I mean, obviously, I'm coming from a particularly kind of UK context, but I mean, from our perspective, and I think we're seeing this, globally. I think that in the general population, we're starting to see much more of a recognition and understanding of well-being and mental health issues, being spoken about a lot more in public life. And I don't think by any means kind of, we can see that there's still kind of people are reluctant to report things, but at the same time, I think people are starting to have more understanding, and I think we're seeing that in research as well, and we're certainly in the UK seeing that at a policy level. We've got the People and Culture Strategy, which is a declaration by the UK research sector of the importance of the research environment and culture. So I think there's a real recognition that in order to produce excellent research, excellent science, you need to make an investment in the people. And especially now because, a lot of researchers are actually making decisions that, maybe I'm going to go beyond research, maybe I'm going to, go into a different career, potentially because of the pressured environment or because, for example, of precarity, precarious employment. So, if we want to hold on to excellent researchers, then we need to treat them well and make sure that they have a good environment to work in. And I think that, governments are recognising that and taking action.
I think it's a need, so it's not something that right now it's gonna might be we should as an institution do this or do that or make I think it will be a need, and we've seen this with the pandemic, that a lot of people and the struggling of a lot of people, so I think it will be required. So that's why I'm positive that that all the actions, they will finally come out in something positive.
Yeah, and I would just like to add here that I think one can see already those changes moving slowly in the right direction. So unfortunately, I cannot remember for the life of me now the name of the researcher and her group. But for example, there is has been a beautiful article and an interview with one of the researchers that in a grant has explicitly asked for additional money for well-being and supporting mental health of her group, that ended up being granted. And thanks to this big amount of money, specifically for that, she could support her group, hiring a so-called happy coach that would work with them and make all of them learn how to interact with each other, talk about mental health issues, how to check in on each other regularly, and kind of pairing people into groups so that they check on each other every week and see how the other one is doing. So bringing them up closer, but also exactly doing this a two-way conversation. So every PhD, postdoc, technician, manager, and also the PI herself could be a part of the conversation of what is going on with me this week. And if I could chat with someone, there will be someone there designated this week for that. And then the happy coach comes back regularly to meet with them and resolve any conflicts if they happen to arise. So I think this kind of an example is a great way to see that some granting bodies seem to be happy about people including this and asking for money for that. And then this can be put to a really good use. So just to add additional thing of how things are changing.
It's nice to see that things are moving like in the right direction, even step by step. Well, you need to start with the first step. I'm gonna read a comment from the audience. They say, Sarah says, "Publish or perish, a very perverse system." Yes, it's evil. A point that occupied for other conference. The way that scientists are currently evaluated is one of the reasons driving stress and bias in research interest. I think we all agree in that. Terrible posters writing publish or perish. In all the labs I've been, there's one everywhere. Do you think that we have support, for example, you need to publish to be somebody there? Do you think we can do something about that? Do you think the evaluations are changing as well and it's not only papers that are evaluated? Do you think that may help? Hanna, go ahead.
So because I just wanted to say that one thing that we can do is promote publishing negative results. So not just publishing the successes, but actually celebrating the work and showing the work that we have done. And now slowly they are showing up those some journals of negative results that people start to publish in. And I think this is extremely important because this also moves the focus on doing good work and not just having luck or searching for easy topics that I'm sure I will be able to publish something on. So I think this promoting this mindset that it's about work and not just about the success is one of the things we can do.
Yeah, negative results are part of the process as well, and we somehow just neglect them. And no, we don't talk about negative results. Well, somebody else needs to know, just to not repeat the same mistakes. So they are essential for learning. Sorry, Elena, I just stepped in you.
No, I mean, I was just wanted to add that also funding agencies, more funding agencies every day, they are trying to incorporate in their evaluation criteria other things that are not based only in numbers, you know. So recently the Spanish agency has adhered the DORA declaration. So you know, maybe things they are changing slowly, because the problem is that when you don't rely on that, then how do you really evaluate the performance, or how do you really, because there's no enough funding for everyone. So how do you compare people to get them the funding if you don't have, you know, the numbers? So that's more difficult, and that's one of the problems, I think, of the how you do that. But I think slowly this will be implemented, and hopefully, I think this will make our life, you know, better, and also the science, I think, more interesting.
And just to add to that, from an institutional perspective, I think that institutions also are kind of understanding that, you know, number of publications, you know, there's an importance to, obviously we need to publish, but at the same time, there's other things that can be used in, for example, promotion criteria, you know, that, you know, being a researcher, being a really good researcher isn't just about publications. You know, there's a lot of other aspects that perhaps haven't been given the recognition that they've deserved previously. And I think now institutions are understanding that if you include recognition and reward for those things, and people who are involved in those things are able to progress, what you're doing is sending a message to people, these things are important. And so I do think we're seeing some changes there.
Okay, we're reaching the end of the session. I don't know if you want to add any final remark, any light. Then I think we went very smoothly. We had a nice overview of everything that's going on. I'm very happy that we were positive, because one of my main worries is I don't want to describe research as a desert and just suffering and tears. I think research it has to be beautiful, and we all should be happy enough to enjoy it. So I'm very glad that you all managed to put some light at the end, and everybody on the audience should see that we are doing things just to improve everybody. And we're pushing institutions, we're pushing centers, and from the individual point of view, I hope that everybody's have some clues now just to become a positive role model. Don't push too much, and sometimes it's just not needed. And happy scientists hopefully will provide with better science. So I think that's all. You can finish 5 minutes earlier. I don't know if you want to add anything else, or if the audience have a last minute question. We have lots of. This was a really wonderful session. Thank you very much. Those are the nice messages we were waiting for. Okay.
Well, thank you, Elena, and everyone for organising this. It's been a great session, and really, really good to get the comments from the audience.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for joining. Thank you very much to everybody on the audience. And if everybody is not feeling okay, just drop us an email. We'll do our best. I think it's evident that it is a safe place. You can just reach out. And thanks, everyone. Have a lovely weekend.